I just love that 60s music. Hello. This is welcome to the NotMom podcast conversation with Karen Malone Wright. That would be me and the lovely Laura Lavoie.
That's me.
Today we are talking about the population drop and the fertility drop that is rocking the world and many countries. Laura, what do you say about letting the ladies know the rules before we get going?
Absolutely. Well, we at the NotMom have an inclusive policy, and we want to make sure everybody knows that. We are a welcoming space that listens to, understands, encourages, and embraces women without children by choice and by chance. And many of our friends are moms, so we also don't like the use of mean girl terms to describe them, their children, or women living a different non-mom experience. So we want to encourage everybody watching right now to participate in the chat, type in your comments, but just keep the rules in mind as you do that. And as we talk about world, national, and state populations this week.
In Pride Month, just throwing that in there. The other thing that Laura and I have been trying to figure out as we come out of our separate quarantines is how to sort of restructure, stay alert to the changes in the world of the NotMom. And we realize, although she and I talk about it all the time, we really haven't taken advantage of the differences between the two of us. While we've been, really working hard to get you some of the best guests we know to join this conversation each month, we've got real things to say, just the two of us. We've lived a lot of places. Some of us have lived a little longer than others. Some of us are a little browner than others. There are many differences, but perhaps for this conversation, the biggest difference is that Laura knew as a little girl, she really never wanted to be a mom. And I knew as a little girl, I wanted to give birth to 12 kids, 13, 14. It really didn't matter. I was an only child, and I was not going to let that happen for anybody else if I could help it. And that ain't the way it worked out, because I don't rule this world. I just play in it. So today what we're going to do is we're going to approach today's topic sort of from that main mindset of by choice, by chance. How do you see the exact same things when we read the news, especially when we see fertility dropping post-COVID, and the big change, well, the big surprise, I suppose, which really isn't a surprise, I don't think, to anybody with a uterus, is a boom of babies was expected the minute we got a vaccine. And everybody was supposed to be going, and after a baby would come out. And they are still doing the but the baby not so much. And some of that is because not only did science give us vaccines, science gave us birth control.
Right. Which has been showing and we'll talk about it a lot more with some of these, the articles that we want to share and talk about a little bit. But a lot of it is over the last 10 years, we just had a new census released, and over the last 10 years, we've seen a big change in the accessibility of birth control. So we'll talk about that not only internationally, but also locally.
So what we want to do in this particular issue is look at the world as a whole and the headlines at that level, and then begin to drill down to our own country, the United States, look at what we've been able to find with a whole lot of search engine help of what's happening in specific other countries. Some of countries are actually, their fertility numbers are going up. Their birth rates are going up, but they are few and far between. And then talk about even some of the cities that we've looked at. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the entire world, the globe as a whole, demographers are saying that in the latter part of this particular century, we are going to begin. It's just barely started, according to these scientists, and that decline of population growth is going to continue for quite a long period. And that is the part that's never happened before. It's not that we've never had a severe drop in population, but for it to continue more than, let's say, 8 years, that's the part that's sort of making them pop their eyes out in surprise.
Exactly. Like the New York Times said in their article, the drop starts to look like a rock thrown off a cliff. So it'll be interesting over the next few years to see how that plays out, the next decades, really, to see how that actually plays out.
Can I add to that, just because I am no scientist and God knows not a mathematician, but the comparison of a rock being thrown over a cliff, for those of you who think that's, well, that's just a little exaggeration, really isn't, when you consider that if there are fewer babies born this year, that means fewer girls to grow up to women. And then when those that smaller group of women decide to have children or not, more of them decide not to have children, you begin to understand how exponentially over the next few decades, this will continue. This decline of births will continue. And we've learned, Laura and I, that it's not always that the women don't want children. Sometimes it's waiting too long. Sometimes it's with the economies of the world as they are. I'll wait till I have a better job. I'll wait till I have more money. And, you waited too long. There are a whole lot of reasons. I think that politically we will see in many countries different voices arguing that the blame is totally the woman's. That, it's sort of a new thing that these women, they don't want the babies like they're supposed to. I don't think that's true. Or speaking somebody who wanted children, I don't think that's true.
Right. And I found, the New York Times article that we're talking about, and I'll pop that slide up here really quick. The first one, the long slide looms for world population, which came out in May earlier this year. I can't help but think when I read the article that my internal pronatalism bell is going off, that the language is very skewed to scare people, like, oh goodness, if you don't start having children now, what are we going to do? But the truth is, populations have changed. They do fluctuate from place to place constantly. And as we also learned in more research of it, there are certainly places in the world that are not experiencing a fertility rate drop. And maybe the answer isn't encouraging higher rates of fertility. Maybe there are other solutions, including things like immigration reform and living wages and affordable childcare and the ability to have children affordably, or paid parental leave, things like that. Things that we don't offer, especially in the US. I know we're talking globally right now, but that we just don't even offer.
And really don't want to consider. Mm-hmm. I think this is where I can put in the words of our very good friend, University of Maine sociologist Amy Blackstone, who explained that it's not about running out of people. Oh my God, no one's having babies. Each country, each individual country knows I've got to have more people so that I can be strong against that guy across the street. And that guy is thinking, oh my goodness, I'm running out of people. So when you begin to look at it only within each country's borders, okay, now maybe you have something to talk about. Take that a step further, and the lovely Amy reminds us that it's not usually the lower income people who aren't having babies, because it's the people who can afford to take some time off from work and go to a doctor and get good birth control. It's the people who can often have choice, because choice is a financially driven thing. Now, there are other ways to say that, like white ladies aren't having the babies and black ladies are, or black and brown ladies are. In many countries, that is the truth. And as Laura and I were saying earlier, my prediction is that there will, within the next 5 to 10 years, there will be voices saying, oh my goodness, the continent of Africa is exploding. rest of the world has no children. Look at them. They're just like, like bunnies out there. They're just animals. No, they're not just animals. You won't give them any birth control and teach them how to use it. You won't help their tribal thinking evolve even an inch to accept the idea that perhaps a man could be the one who is shooting blanks, and perhaps a woman can actually have the right to say, I don't think I want that baby.
Right, right. And, I did also find, so in the New York Times article, it's interesting. They mentioned at the very beginning, they talk about how German towns were being razed to be replaced with green spaces. And they made it sound like this is a terrible thing. But later on in the article, it also mentioned that Germany actually saw an increase in their population growth with expansions of affordable childcare and paid parental leave. So the dystopic scene that they painted, that, just swaths of German land was being razed and now it's, it's an urban wasteland. It seemed to me like that's more of a shift to demographics, not specifically related to fertility rate, or what's implied ultimately is that women are too selfish to not have any children.
Which, in my opinion, boils down to, oh my God, the women have figured out they control this bitch. Because, the Guttmacher Institute did a study where they learned that more than a third of the women who are being counted right now as, oh my God, she's of age and she's not using her uterus, those women want children. They plan to have children, but they will do it in their own time. Thank you. And so to freak out because your country doesn't have any babies, you're not listening to the women. Those same women that you counted and you ran away with numbers saying, oh my God, we have no people. What those women really told you is, I don't want it now. And I can't tell you when I'm going to want it because I'm only 20.
Exactly.
Come back and check with me in 5 years.
Right. No, the New York Times article, and you sent this to me, and I thought it was interesting. Like they painted this doom and gloom idea. Imagine a gig economy filled with grandparents and Super Bowl ads promoting procreation. First of all, the gig economy is currently made up of a lot of older adults.
I sent that to Laura because I would be a grandparent, surely, since I'm 65, but I'm not a grandparent. But I am definitely in the gig economy. If gig means standing around, sending out emails every day going, please hire me to write you something, then that's gig. My husband's gig. So this idea that, this is leading us toward grandparents, trying to be freelancers. Who do they think they are? Well, first of all, they're already here. And second, they're already here doing it because we're doing that gig economy work throughout their 40s, 50s, and now they're in their 60s, and they see no reason to give it up.
Exactly. And in many cases, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, I know a lot of people who started their own business doing, what is essentially gig economy work, literally their entire lives. My mother-in-law owned her own business and worked until the day she died. She didn't want to do anything else. That's what she wanted to do. She needed to generate income. That's a different conversation. That's a conversation about economy. But she also would not have, I don't know what else she would have done. She wouldn't have retired. That wasn't her. She needed to work. So, to paint it like, oh no, oh goodness, this is going to be so terrible. Again, like I said, the warning bells were just ringing as I was reading it because it all comes across so doom and gloom and very pronatalist. And if you don't know what pronatalism is, and you're watching, I highly encourage you to check out some resources on that, including The Baby Matrix by Laura Carroll, which talks about kind of what that is, what that means. And it's the idea that having children is the pinnacle of human existence and what drives our economy in a nutshell. It's a lot more complicated than that. I'm sure people will correct me, but that's the basic idea of it.
Yeah. I would agree with that basically, and I'd also say just Google the word. Get it. I know. I mean, seriously, just go to a resource where you can just dictionary online, whatever, and just understand it because it was new. I got to tell you, in the early days of NotMom, pronatalism was a word. I sort of, in my mind, I saw these women, bomb throwing women and marching down the street going, we don't want babies. But what I realized is that our world, certainly the United States of America, is sort of set up on the flip side of that. The world itself is marching all around its women saying, have babies, have babies, have babies. And it comes at you from a million different angles that you're really not noticing. It's a lot like racism or anti-LGBTQ isms. I mean, all of that, it's people who are taking a lot of energy to figure out how to manipulate your life. And it's your life and you only got one. So, I'm telling you, somebody who waited too long, figure out what you want and then go do it. Do not let them take over.
So we have a whole bunch of really interesting statistics from around the world. So we should probably share some.
We're sliding from world into countries, y'all.
Yes. So from around the world. So this was an interesting take. There's it's kind of busting myths, right? People have this idea, people from outside of India or Mexico, especially in the US, have this idea that there's just an overpopulation, and in some cases there are. But birth rates are falling, and as of right now, already below the replacement rate per family in both Mexico and India.
There were so many that we found in our research for this episode, Laura, that I'm older than you, and I could remember when the idea of Italy having to shut down maternity wards because not enough women were having babies, having a trouble. There are many articles that I found in the research that talk about Italy's women looking for just an OB/GYN, emphasis on the OB, and can't find them because med students aren't choosing that as a specialty. Now in America, I was raised on the thought that if you were an OB/GYN, you will never starve. There will always be women having babies, because that's the part that's pronatalism, I think, Laura, as an example. Focusing on the GYN part of that hyphenated title is always less than the OB part. It's all about the babies. And, oh, by the way, yes, we want you to not die of uterine cancer. But what we're really here for is a doctor who will deliver your baby safely. And fewer and fewer med students are going into that because they're not making money at it. They're making money on the GYN end, but the whole idea, I worked in healthcare for just a pinch of my career. And what I learned is you always want women in general, historically, traditionally speaking, because if a hospital or a healthcare system gets a young woman who then begins having babies, all right, now we've got the woman going to the GYN part, the woman's bringing in her children, her new babies to the pediatric part. And the woman is also going to be the caretaker for her parents. So now we got geriatric medicine in, and pretty soon that one woman is responsible. She's a moneymaker. She's an influencer. And that's all about to change.
Right. No, and there's a lot of really interesting statistics. For example, you sent over Japan, where adult diapers outsell ones for babies. Japan is an interesting case because, a lot of people would want to move to Japan, but Japan keeps their borders pretty tight. And if, again, they open it up to more immigration, there may not be quite as many issues or be different issues.
The diapers for yeah, that was a deep one. The one, I think my winning statistic that we found was Nigeria. That if things go as they are starting to look like they will continue, there will soon be more people living in Nigeria than in China. And just to say that, it just doesn't sound right to your brain, does it?
Right, because it's simply just from area of, where the population can be, right? Like China is this just massive, massive country.
And what does that tell us about how much fun it's going to be in Nigeria, where it's a hell of a lot hotter? where the resources aren't as good. I mean, the whole world is like, throwing stuff at China to be their friend, or at least to, be noticed, recognized, whatever. Not so much help zooming into Nigeria. So again,
Right.
Africa, as usual, will be really challenged in these coming years.
Right. And then China is expecting their population to fall significantly. I mean, under 1 billion in 2100. So, and China's an interesting case, right? Because they're the country that many, many years ago tried the one-child policy. And
it worked.
Well, it worked, except it created a whole host of other problems.
Yes. I posted something that I found after you and I got all this, together, Laura, and I posted on our Facebook page today about how many, now that they're doing well quarantine wise, but how many Chinese women are deliberately choosing not to have children, even though they grew up in a culture where, of course, you're going to have to, if you're only allowed one, you're going to have that one. If you're allowed as many as you want, you're going to have the idea that you would hurt your parents, and that's what it's all about, is respect for parents, that you would hurt your mother and father by saying, I'm sorry, I'm not doing this,
right,
is unheard of.
Right.
Now you add to that the whole country is losing people. I mean, and Nigeria will have more. It's very hard to imagine, and yet I can imagine it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I couldn't imagine a world pandemic, but because I saw the movie, and it's like, okay, that was a movie. Well,
or it's real life, and it's a far less exciting. The world pandemic is far less exciting than it actually seemed when we were all just at home in our pajamas. But I wanted to bring up Dr. Amy Blackstone, of course, featured in the NPR article. And that we love her, and she's a friend of the show and all of our iterations. But I appreciate her appreciating us for taking a critical look at the New York Times piece, because it did have a lot of really useful data, but it didn't get to the root. And I think this is something not only we need to address in the U.S., but it certainly happens globally. But that what this really has to do with is a lot more than just about declining birth rates and a bunch of ugly stuff no one wants to talk about, like racism, classism, nationalism, and sexism.
The interesting thing is that, and I'm so sorry to the journalism community. I know better than this, but if I hadn't been doing this research, I wouldn't have realized that the top credit in that New York Times story from May 22nd gives the names of 3 journalists that, of course, I can't find right this second.
Let's see. I've got them somewhere. Damien Cave, Emma Bubola, and Cho Sang-hun.
Good job, you 3. But once you finish the whole article, you find additional reporting was done. So this was a huge team. I think I can call it, pretty large team of reporters to gather all this information. And so my suggestion, which maybe we'll, send off on Twitter after this is over, is to suggest to the New York Times that you're very fond of doing special editions. Do one on this. You've already done the groundwork. All you got to do is repackage it in a nice little pull-out section. But look at our country and our world only through the eyes, and get into some of those reasons and complications of population loss that Laura just mentioned.
Absolutely.
And how we're dealing with it. Absolutely.
No, in the NPR interview with Amy, which I'll pop up that slide again, just to point that out, the NPR US birth rate drops to lowest levels in 4 decades, which is really interesting if you have a chance to listen to it, because as far as I felt, there was a lot of gotcha questions, which Amy handled with absolute mastery. But it was one thing where she said, one of the issues we need to look at is better immigration policies. And the interviewer said, how would that help? And the ultimate answer is, it's not that, yes, the US population is an issue. It's not necessarily birth rates, because the hidden message when people say we need more American women to have babies is we need more wealthy white American women to have babies. And that's what people are, that's what Paul Ryan practically said when he made that statement several years ago. And it's infuriating to think that that's where we are as a country right now in 2021, that we can't look at other factors and other things that we need to talk about.
Okay, audience, I'm sitting over here quietly smiling because this is another example of Laura over there and me over here. Laura actually listened to the audio of Dr. Amy Blackstone's interview on NPR. I only read the transcript. We reached the same conclusions. Just reading the transcript, I was like, oh, there's a little tension here. Because I didn't think, I was thinking it, but and then I got to the part where Amy brought up the fact that, no, we're really concerned that America is losing the number of white babies, and not just white, lower income white babies of any level are beginning to go, which has always been America's great fear. And it's just, which we knew at least 10 to 20 years ago. We knew that as the country grew browner, folks who believe that their team is the absolute best would not be happy.
Right.
So Amy, said that, and the NPR interviewer was like, oh, is that true? And Amy let her very politely know, oh, hell yes, it's true.
Exactly.
And so when Laura and I connected, and Laura said, I actually listened to it. And I said, well, was I right that I was getting that vibe? She go, oh, yes.
Oh,
so
yes. Yes.
If you have time, listen to the NPR interview. We love NPR. We're not cracking no shade, but we're just saying there was not an open mind to Dr. Blackstone, who will tolerate no fools lightly.
Yeah. Yes. And for that reason, she is one of my favorite people. So I will always champion that. And it was a good interview too. Like, it's not just, saying that Lula Garcia Navarro is a bad interviewer. She's great, but it had a lot of great information, but it also had a lot of, almost condescension, like, oh, but women aren't having babies, pat on the head,
I hate to circle it back, Laura. This is your damn fault, but that is another example of a pronatalist mind. Because again, I didn't hear the voices. I didn't hear emphasis. I had a printed transcript. And I thought to myself, it was 1,000 years ago. I was a journalism major in undergrad. But I thought to myself, this interviewer went into that interview with a set mind of what her responses were going to be coming to her. Yes. And Amy from the start was blowing them up. No, that's not true. Mm-hmm. No, that's not what I believe. And it did that sort of, I think, started it. There wasn't a whole heck of a lot of openness, and we can move on, or else we'll be using up all our time. But all we're saying is, rat on Miss Amy.
Yes, and one of the things she did bring up that I do think is important to say, because it is, it still has only been a year out of our lives, really, the pandemic, but it did change the way people were thinking and doing things. And the pandemic really emphasized this labor inequality among household labor. When women women are working from home, but their kids are also school from home, and they have to be responsible for their own work, making sure their children are doing school, and taking care of general household duties that are usually attributed to the women. So it changed the way people were bye, Amy. Changed the way people approached things, and it might have made women without children start to think about when would be a better time for them. Which I think brings us to California, right?
So I was just going to say, now that was a great segue into California. California, for those of you, and we know we have lots of fans around the world, California is America's largest state. One of 8 humans who claim American citizenship live in the state of California. And California expected its governor, its state government, really thought that they were going to get a whole new crop of babies post-COVID, and that hasn't happened, and it just has stunned them from everything I'm seeing.
Yes, yes. And we based a lot of this on an article from the LA Times, California seeing a COVID baby bust, which I'll tell you, when everybody said at the beginning of the pandemic, oh, you know, there's going to be a baby boom, what's going to happen? I'm like, I don't know so much about that. And it's interesting because somewhere in all of this, there was also that, oh yes, I think it was in that LA Times, the flu pandemic of 1918 also led to a baby bust. And that was without modern reproductive advancements. So,
you know, I mean, really, yeah. See, that's where you need a degree in whatever it takes to become a demographer, but you also need to look at just a tad bit of history. So before you set your hair on fire that the world is losing this horrible this population drop, what did it do after that 1918 flu? And the minute you see, oh, they had a baby bust without birth control, but that won't happen now because people are so loose and the sluts are running through the streets. Nay, nay. You know, it's the exact same thing. The women, and the fear, frankly, of what a pandemic makes you feel about bringing a child into the world. I'm stunned that they are surprised, and yet I want to know how many female voices were in these, you know, demographers. I mean, a lot of times in these articles, they just say demographers predict, and they don't really tell you how many were female.
Right. Right, exactly. So yes, the LA Times said California is expected to see almost 50,000 fewer births in 2021. But what I found interesting, and you did too, because I know this because you sent me the information, was it's being attributed to affordable access to quality birth control, specifically long-term birth control, like IUDs.
Yeah, that's making me feel old, Laura, because I was around and I was a young thing dipping it and doing it, as Wendy Williams might say, when the IUD, the intrauterine device, came out the first time. And it was a little risky, but the idea that you could have this painless thing, it's not always painless thing inserted into your uterus and just keep it there for like 7 years. Not think about it. Boink your way to happiness as many times as you want. Life goes on. And the quote that we found was a young woman in California who explained the popularity of the IUD is if you lose your job and you lose your health care and you're on birth control pills, then suddenly you have no doctor, you have no prescription. If you have something that is inside your body, they're not coming to pull it out.
Right. They're not taking it away. Once it's there for good. Or good until it expires and you need to have it removed.
And so, you know, when they first came out, they were very dangerous. There were several deaths, women's deaths attributed to them, or children that were born misformed or challenged, physically challenged. All that is gone away. And as far as I could tell, IUDs are working very well right now, and they are really enjoyed by millennial women.
Right, which is that's another interesting specification is millennial women, which is something Dr. Amy Blackstone talked about again on NPR, where she was asked some sort of question about, oh, but millennial women just aren't having children. What do you say about that? You know, nudge, nudge. But here's the thing, millennial women are just now turning 40 or just have turned 40, maybe 41, right? The oldest of them. There's still millennials in their 20s and 30s who just simply haven't decided or just haven't had children yet. You know, like, I don't think we can just say millennials across the board just decided not to have kids. That's a hard argument to make when many of them aren't even at the point in their lives where that is a decision they're making.
They can't even hear the clock yet. They don't know there is a clock. I'm 21. I'm going to Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
And, I mean, It's not about that right now.
Yeah, my oldest nephew is a millennial, and he'll be 26 this year. And I know that he's not even thinking. I mean, that's not part of he works at Google. He has other things he's doing.
He's also a guy.
Well, right. But
I mean, you and I think we're well, maybe not you, because again, you knew from day one that you really didn't think you wanted to be a mom, and I, because I did want to, I always knew, okay, there's an end game to this. While the men keep, popping out kids in their 80s because all they have to do is squirt and go. It takes a lot more work to get the egg to drop, to get it to stay there for a day, to get it to be healthy, and then there's, of course, there's more work for the women.
Plus 9 months of actually growing a human being.
Yes, and those 9 months of actually growing. So I find that fascinating. But what we've seen is what happens in California can happen certainly in other American states. And I think there are, because these are, I'm convinced, mostly male voices we're hearing. Give Amy her own show, NPR.
Yeah, no kidding.
But because we are hearing a lot of men, I don't think that there are enough states that U.S. states that realize, oh, what's happening in California very well could happen in my state. And because we're just lucky, Miss Laura, we are speaking to our audience today on the day that the Supreme Court in America has okayed everything about the Affordable Care Act for the third time. Yes. It is just fine. And there are zillions of American women who are using it for their birth control to make it, say what? Affordable.
Right. If not free.
Right. And if I was still 20 and could get something that would keep me birth controlled up for 7 years for free, oh my gosh, I'd have been worse than I was. I'm just saying. And my friends who are watching know I do not lie.
But, I think it interesting. So where I think you and I have a very different, like you said, this wasn't something that you chose to do. For me, I knew since I was very, very tiny that children and me, children are fine. It's kind of like other people's children are fine. I don't want them living with me. But what I found interesting about reading all of these articles, like I said, it's the pronatalism, push, 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 push. But it's also that I'm not personally seeing a decline in anything. Like, babies are still freaking everywhere.
Not on my street. I'm with you, sister. We got double strollers, triple strollers, puppies that were bought at the same time the baby was born. We got the whole 9 yards.
I have
my street, but
even just this past year, we have some very, very close friends who, at the very beginning of the pandemic, they decided to have a baby. They actually needed to go to a fertility clinic to make that happen. And they did, and their daughter was born in November. And I love these friends to pieces, and I love their daughter. I mean, in very small doses. But I didn't see anybody just say, "Oh, pandemic, not for me." They actively made this choice. This wasn't like, oops. They went and they did this thing on purpose. And I know plenty of other people that had kids during the pandemic.
Yes, but are these white kids?
Well, unfortunately, just because of the everyone that I'm thinking of, but that's
good.
Just
no, I'm not good. That's what our country wants.
That's what they want.
I don't know if they'll get it.
They're white kids, but my friends are 2 moms, so that is not what the country wants.
Oh, okay. That just 6 steps back.
It's what I want. It's what they want. That's the country I want to live in. But
open and fair. So we sort of focus just a little bit on, to help you, dear viewer, go back out into the world and explain to people and nip fake stuff in the bud. Go out there and have some information to help arm you when conversations begin to say, well, women and fill in the blank, and your ear tells you it's not true. Because a lot of the reasons that the fertility decisions are being made by women to say, I'll do it later, or I won't do it at all, comes from countries and places that are beginning to give women the choices of education, of support in so many ways to help them chase dreams that are separate from motherhood. And that's, again, and even that can anger a lot of people, that you would do that, that you would encourage women to figure out what you want before all of your focus is on this little one.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that exactly, why Malala became newsworthy, right? Because men in her country decided that she was sending the wrong message.
Well, that I thought it was, well, number one, it was, why is there a school for you?
Correct.
There's no reason for you to, I mean, again, I'm old enough to actually know human being women who were told by their parents, we're not going to pay for you to go to college because it would be wasted. You're only going to drop out and get married. Period.
Yeah, no, I actually just today, and I actually wish I had saved it. It was a tweet from some old white politician. I have no idea who it was, but it was some sort of, it was something about women shouldn't go to college because they shouldn't be smarter than their husbands, which, of course, first of all, there's a difference between smart and educated or uneducated or any of those. Those things are not mutually exclusive. And second of all, yeah, because we've educated our daughters, and now our daughters are standing up and they're the people that want to make decisions and do things. And, again, that's the place I want to live. I don't want to live in a place that's not that.
All I can think of is, if women weren't smarter than men, America would produce no sitcoms. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, okay, from All in the Family to Everybody Loves Raymond, there has to be a wife that's smarter than her goofy ass husband, who generates most of the income, but can't figure out how to open an umbrella in the rain. And
my current favorite example of that right now, where we've been binging, we've been watching the show a lot, is Blackish. And it's such a great show.
I love Blackish, of course. Yes.
That's
my husband. Go to the hubby.
Is live on the internet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's the same trope, right?
It's the same trope, except he's black. I mean, he can't mow the lawn. He can't, and his doctor is say it together, an anesthesiologist, one of the most complicated specialties in medicine. One wrong twist of the knob and her patient is dead and doesn't wake up. And okay, moving on. We were talking about the whys of why women are making these choices to delay and it's not always COVID. And one of the big ones that just blew my mind, I mean, I know it costs a lot to live in LA. I can't even, I can't imagine at any point in life, really, even in the cool Hollywood years, that it was cheap to live in LA.
Right.
But what we've got going on now is that it is more expensive to send a preschooler to daycare than it would be to send your freshman teenager off to the California State Long Beach University.
Right.
I can almost not speak after saying those words.
Right.
And frankly, I just have to say, LA Times, you needed a little bit more information there, because I found myself thinking, okay, is this Lionel Richie's Dancing in the Street kind of daycare? I mean, well, what the hell? You know what I mean? Is this just the neighbor lady taking care? Tell me what kind of daycare costs more than a college freshman's expenses.
Exactly. Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, there was a lot of nuance and context left out of all of these articles. I say with the sole exception of Amy's NPR interview, where it was only 5 minutes, and I know she could have gone on for a lot longer, but it's the only one where she just said, "Look, people, we're actually worried about the wrong thing."
Well, I still haven't listened to it. But when I read the transcript and saw it was only a 5-minute article, I thought to myself, now I'm an old TV-ish kind of person, worked in television many years. I understand time and its value when it comes to broadcast, whether it's radio or television or whatever. But this topic of the entire world and what's happening to it that has never happened before deserves more than 5 minutes. Now, if that means you do 5 minutes today and tomorrow when I come back on my show, we'll do 5 minutes more with a different person, fine. But for you to think that you can cover this in 5 minutes is nuts. I've been seeing that, because everything in the world is important right now. Politics is important, and COVID is important, and population is important. And I mean, the list goes on, and yet talk shows, much like everything else, have to change. And without change, none of this is going to work as we go forward. And so if you've been doing the same format and the same time segments since you first started your TV show, The View, I'm talking to you, then you need to get it fixed up, because you cannot discuss these big issues in the same amount of time that you use to sell me a new dishwasher. You just can't.
Right. And so you also, when you send over your notes to me, you also include a what's next, You
don't have to keep giving me credit. Don't. I am not the only one doing stuff.
You did a lot of work. We all did a lot of work.
Well,
See,
Laura,
that's the future of broadcasting, is we can do these shows on our own time and at our own
new format. We have no guests to embarrass, so we can just be ourselves.
Okay. Exactly. But I love this, and I should have made a slide for it, but you specifically said, demographers warn against seeing population decline as simply a cause for alarm. Many women are having fewer children because that's what they want. And smaller populations could lead to higher wages, more equal societies, lower carbon emissions, and higher quality of life for the smaller numbers of children that are born. And as you know, that's entirely my worldview. I think that if we want women to have children, we make it affordable for them to do so. If we want to pay into a social security system, we pay workers more money. All of those things, they're all tied together. And then we can also talk about equity and inclusivity and all of that, because it's all part of the same root problem.
Well, the reason I did send you that quote, and it's a great place to begin thinking about, unfortunately ending this episode, is the idea that if we don't have enough people, we can't take care of our planet. Hello, we're not taking care of it now. So the quote that was used in that story, which I just happen to have right here, is that there's no such thing as destiny. In other words, fine, we lose a kabillion people across the globe. The people that are left don't have to turn into fighting wolves and snarling dogs. They can still work to save our environment and improve our planet, perhaps better as technology changes, as they keep working on it and don't give up on themselves or humanity or the globe that supports us all. The thing that comes across in the research, Laura, for me, is a whole lot of assumption.
Yeah.
And though I've never really worked as a paying job 100% as a journalist, the one thing for sure I remember from learning in college in J classes was, don't assume you know a damn thing. Talk to people, do some research, Google, and now we have the magic G, do some Googling, and maybe you'll find out that the worst thing, why would you, I'm sorry, my elderly aunt always, if she has one hiccup, I'm going blind. Oh. And she's really scared, and she's really scared. At the end of the day, everything that happens to her physically, because her husband is already dead, leads to the worst. And I finally asked her, why do you always jump to the worst thing? Why don't you, play the optimism game with me? Maybe, when you see the doctor, it'll be okay. And she said, because if I jump to the worst thing and then the best thing happens, it'll be a happy surprise. And I wonder sometimes if that's the way demographers are looking at the globe.
Right.
I mean, we're all going to die. Everything we've brought back in the environment's going to go away because we don't have enough people to take care of them. Nobody will. Well, that's like saying we'll never, ever, ever have enough physicians to deliver the babies that are coming into our world.
Right.
It's because we're seeing a drop in med students doing it now, and which is financially driven. So much for, I just wanted to work with the babies.
Right.
There's too much assumption. At the end of the day, there's just too much assumption. And some of it, excuse me, some of it is doctors and scientists who assume they know what women will do.
Yes. And
in many cases, the women have told them what they're going to do, but they're not listening.
Exactly. So I think that actually brings us to the end of the show. Almost perfectly, in a perfect way. So I want to stick the slide up again just so that you guys can go take a look at some of these articles that we have quoted here, also to cover our bases because we did quote them here. So show your work. That's what I always say, show your work. And that's what we did. But I think that is it for today. I will be back in a month, I believe. And we have no idea what that show is going to be about. We're going to talk about that in the coming weeks.
We have an idea. We're just not telling them. We do. I'm not lying. We have an idea.
We do have an idea.
We have no idea what day we're talking about because there is no regularity in quarantine escape land. But I love you, Laura. I love you, listeners and viewers. Send us a message. You can reach out to us on Twitter, although we haven't shared a lot on Twitter lately. We'll be back, just like the women who are going to have a kid. They're just going to do it later, all right? Don't be yelling at me because we're not happy on Instagram. We are keeping up with Facebook because that's all I can handle.
Right? And you can also watch this podcast or vidcast or live streaming. I don't know what to call it. You can watch it on YouTube and Facebook anytime. Share it with your friends.
Yes, we're Googleable. I mean, we're linkable.
We are indeed.
Linkable?
Yes, okay. Sure.
Love you. Everybody stay safe. Put your mask on when you feel like it. And if it's not the actual mask that we know and love from the last year, just remember what the airline stewards say. Put that mask on first, then worry about the rest of the world.
Good point. All right, everybody. We'll see you all in a month. Bye.
Bye.